Hello, Internet. I am Pastor Recoil, and welcome to my parish. Today is the 21st Sunday after Pentecost, and we're going to talk about it. Welcome to Pastor Recoil's Parish, where I talk about some things in the Bible that you may not have heard about in church, either because it's not quite appropriate for all audiences, or it just isn't something that's easy to talk about in a sermon. Today's readings for the 21st Sunday after Pentecost are Habakkuk 1:1-4 and 2:1-4, Psalm 119 verses 137 to 144, 2 Thessalonians 1:1-4 and 11-12, and Luke 19, 1-10. Today, we're going to talk about justice. Now, justice is pretty important to God. And I don't mean justice like people who do bad should have bad done to them, like we too often think about justice. Here in America especially, justice has a law and order vibe to it that means that people get what they deserve. Now, there's two sides to that kind of justice. We think that good people should get good things and that bad people should get bad things. But we also start to think that if someone gets bad things, they must be a bad person. And if someone gets good things, then they must be a good person. I don't have time in this video to get into all of why that's a problem, but it starts to very quickly imply that people who are wealthy are morally better than people who are poor. So people who are wealthy start to think that they have been extra blessed and tell people who are poor that they have some moral failing for their poverty. God's justice, though, is different. God isn't so much concerned with people getting what they deserve, although that is somewhat a part of it. It's more concerned with making sure that people don't get what they deserve, especially when it comes to negative things. For instance, in our reading for Habakkuk, the prophet cries out to God for justice. "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous, therefore judgment comes forth perverted." Habakkuk is seeing the suffering of the people around him and is crying out for God to make it right. We don't know exactly what wrongs Habakkuk was seeing, but since most of the rest of the prophets are concerned with this, we can infer that judges were corrupt, the rich were exploiting the poor, widows and orphans were being neglected, immigrants were being taken advantage of, things like that. Habakkuk sees this and says, "God, your law is being perverted, bring your justice." But what does God's justice look like? In Habakkuk's time, it looks very weird, especially to us. It meant using the Neo-Babylonian Empire to punish God's people, only for the Neo-Babylonians then to be punished even more harshly. Habakkuk is not exactly pleased with this, and neither am I if I'm being honest, but I think we get a better example in the story of Zacchaeus the tax collector in Luke's Gospel. In the 1st century CE Roman Empire, tax collectors were more than just the equivalent of the IRS. They were seen as collaborators with the occupying Romans for personal gain. Tax collectors had permission to, so long as they gave Rome the appropriate cut, overcharge anyone they wanted and pocket the difference. So tax collectors were enriching themselves and exploiting the people, not unlike portrayals of King John and the Sheriff of Nottingham in the Robin Hood legends. Now, one day, as Jesus is visiting Jericho, a man named Zacchaeus, who happened to be not very tall, was the chief tax collector in the city. So he was incredibly wealthy with probably ill-gotten wealth. He wanted to see this Jesus guy that everyone was talking about, but he couldn't because there was a large crowd and, as we mentioned, Zacchaeus is short. So he climbs a tree. Jesus sees him in the tree, calls to him and says, "Zacchaeus, I'm staying at your house today." Now, as an aside, there is an incredibly catchy song about this event. So if you're really bored after watching this video, I'm not even going to bother linking it. I'm going to make you do this yourself because it's worth it. Look up a song called "Zacchaeus Was a Wee Little Man." And it's everything you want it to be. So Zacchaeus welcomes Jesus into his home, and everyone gets upset about this because Zacchaeus was the chief tax collector. He was the head collaborator in Jericho, and he stole a lot of people's money. But Zacchaeus, without any prompting, stands up and goes, "You know what? I'm giving half of what I have to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone, I will pay them back 4 times over." Zacchaeus has basically just impoverished himself because it's almost certain that he had defrauded people. And so Jesus says, "Today salvation has come to this house, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." This is what God's justice looks like. Now, technically, Zacchaeus isn't punished for his wrongdoing. He does everything because he wants to after this encounter with Jesus. But the things that Zacchaeus does are more than just apologizing. They're restorative. He pays back those he wronged. Half of his wealth goes to help the poor. He didn't just stand up and say, "I'm so sorry for what I did." He made it right. This is the kind of justice that God works in the world. Not justice that just punishes, but justice that restores. Even with the example of Habakkuk and the Babylonian conquest, ultimately God's people are restored to their land after the exile. God's justice is done. But if justice is the realm of God, if God is the one who makes justice happen, does that mean we should do nothing? If God works justice in the world, do we leave it all up to God to take care of? Of course not. We still struggle for justice. We work to bring what restoration we can, but without the pressure of needing to make everything right. To paraphrase Black theologian James Cone, we can give our all to the fight for justice precisely because we don't need to be concerned with winning it. God's justice has already won. So if you want to see more content like this, check out the links to my right, or click the logo below my face to subscribe so you'll know when my next video comes out. Thank you for watching, and take the time this week to love your neighbor as yourself, especially if you don't like them all that much.